Hey guys, it's Reagan and today I'm here to give you my January wrap-up. In the month of January, I am actually very pleased with how many books I read. I read a total of 6 books, but a couple of those books were like really long. So I'm just saying, I'm pleased with myself. I'm allowed to say that. Anyway, let's go ahead and get started with the wrap-up. The first book I completed this month was A Wise Man's Fear by Patrick Rothfuss. This is book 2 to the Kingkiller Chronicles, of course, by Patrick Rothfuss, and the first one being The Name of the Wind. I read The Name of the Wind last November. It ended up being my favorite book of the year last year. I really loved it, so I was pumped to dive into this behemoth of a book. This book is just about 1,000 pages. Yeah, it's huge. This novel I really liked. I'm not sure which one I liked more, which is fine because they're both fantastic in their own right. But the things that I really appreciated about the sequel was the world was expanded. Cove got to travel to a lot of new places and meet a lot of new characters and a lot of new cultures, which I thought was really awesome. And his magic also increased, which I really liked. If you're not aware, The Name of the Wind is an epic fantasy series with beautiful writing and awesome magic. It's just absolutely fantastic. Side note, I don't know how he's gonna finish this series in 3 books unless the third book is like 40,000 pages long, but that's a discussion for another day. Of course, I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. The next book I picked up was Wolf by Wolf by Ryan Graudin. This is Ryan Graudin's newest release and I really liked it. This is an alternate history novel set in a world where the Axis powers won World War II, and our main character lives in this world, obviously, and she is part of a resistance movement and she's trying to take down the regime. So as part of this resistance movement, she joins this motorcycle race because the winner of this motorcycle race gets to meet Hitler, and she wants to meet Hitler so she can kill Hitler. This novel is really cool. It combines some like fantastical elements with some cool elements of alternate history. It was super fast paced and the race element of this novel was so fun. I apparently really like motorcycle races. Ryan Graudin is definitely becoming one of my favorite YA authors. You can tell she takes a lot of care and does a lot of research for her books before she writes them, which is something I really appreciate. This is not a standalone. I think it's going to be a series or a duology or something along those lines, and it ended on a crazy cliffhanger, and I cannot wait to see where it takes us, and I gave this book a 4.5 out of 5 stars. It was really entertaining. Next up, I read another huge book, and that is the Aeronaut's Windlass by Jim Butcher. I'm not kidding, it's a big guy. This is the first book to Jim Butcher's newest fantasy series, and I was anticipating this book so much. That was a delayed phrase. But some of you may know, I'm a huge fan of Jim Butcher's Codex Alera series, which is his fantasy series that's completed. I love it. I love it so much. So going into this, I had such high expectations. This book was alright. This novel follows a lot of different perspectives, and they all reside in this one place called the Spire, which is like this city in the sky that's totally contained. They can't see the sky or anything. We follow a lot of different perspectives. We follow some students who are in the academy learning to become part of like the Royal Guard. We also follow a captain who controls and flies a sky ship, which is really neat, and all of their lives cross paths as they're kind of thrown into this conspiracy. The thing about this book is, it took me a while to get into, and it took me a while to get through. It's slow in some places, it's confusing in some places, but at the same time it had so many elements of Jim Butcher's writing that I really like. There were some characters that were super funny. Specifically, there's a perspective in this novel that is by far one of my favorite perspectives I've read from in a while. The perspective is of a cat, and it's so great. But that being said, there was just some elements of this book that just took me forever to get through. The ending was very engaging, and I'll probably continue on with the series, but overall I was disappointed with this book, and I ended up giving it a 3 out of 5 stars. I just wanted to love it so much more than I did. The next book I completed is the Perustopia Book Club pick of the month for January, and this month we are working with Harper, and the novel is Curio by Eveline Denmark. This is a YA fantasy alternate history type novel. It follows our main character Gray, who lives in a world that's very like a Western society type situation. However, everyone who lives in her town has this mutation gene called the starvation gene, which makes them unable to consume food. So because of that, the people in power, called the Chemist, have created this potion that people drink every day so they're able to eat. Because of this, of course, they have taken a lot of power and have installed a lot of rules that are just crappy. Our main character Gray gets in trouble and due to a series of things gets thrown into this curio cabinet which is full of lifelike dolls. This novel has some really interesting settings I really like. I've done a full review of this book which I'll link down below, and Sasha and I have already done the live show as well which I'll link down below, but I really like the settings of this book. That steampunk curio cabinet and the alternate Western society that she initially resided in. I thought it was really cool. I liked some elements of the plot. I found it entertaining, a little tropey, which sometimes is to be expected. I ended up giving this a 3 out of 5 star. Again, if you want more in-depth thoughts, go to those videos down below. I talk about it in length and in depth. But yeah, overall, it was a good book. Curio. The next book I completed this month was The Thief by David Benioff. Before I even talk about the book, I found out halfway through this book that David Benioff is the writer of Game of Thrones, like the show, which I thought was really neat. Like, he's normally a screenwriter, but he wrote a book. Anyway, I thought that was cool. So this is a historical fiction novel set in Russia, and I really, really loved it. It's kind of a weird historical fiction novel. Let me just explain by the plot. So this is set during the siege of Leningrad, which, if you're not aware, is the time in World War II where the Germans have surrounded the city of Leningrad, or better known as St. Petersburg, and it's mass starvation. Millions of people die in Leningrad, there's very little food, blah 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 blah. This particular book follows two characters, two very different characters, two very like kind of ridiculous characters, and basically they're arrested for all sorts of weird things that are probably untrue, conspiracy against the Soviet government, things like that. And they're basically offered their freedom if they can find a dozen eggs for the colonel's daughter's wedding. A dozen eggs in a city where millions of people are starving to death, in the middle of winter, in the middle of the siege by the Germans. And it's just so great. This novel is so fantastic because it does so many things very well. For one, it really, I think, captures the experiences of the people living in Leningrad at the time. It's a very sad, dark, depressing time, but at the same time it injects a weird, humorous, and joyful spirit of the people living there, because yes, everyone's dying, but people are still living. Obviously the characters are a little larger than life, specifically one of the characters, Koila, who's like he's just so funny. And it's just a really good book. It's not long. I read it in maybe 2 days, and it was just so thoroughly entertaining, and it's such an interesting snapshot on this larger historical moment. It was just so great. I gave it 5 stars. I really, really enjoyed it. And the last book I read this month was Starflight by Melissa Landers. This book I really enjoyed. I was a little surprised because lately when I've been going into some YA books, I've been it's been hit or miss for me. While I enjoy them, I'm kind of like bored by the conventionality of it all. But this book I feel like dealt with like the fun parts of YA really well. Like, don't get me wrong, this book isn't like rocket science, but it was so fun and it was just done well that I enjoyed the whole thing. But anyway, this is set in a futuristic Earth society. It follows our main character Solera, and due to some circumstances, basically she's a convicted convict and she has that tattooed on her fingers. At the beginning of the novel, she's trying to find work as an indentured servant on a spaceship so she can basically get free passage to the outer rings of the galaxy, where she can basically start her life over, where people don't care about the tattoos on her knuckles. However, because she's a convict, no one wants to hire her as a servant besides basically her worst enemy from high school, this really cocky guy named Doran. So because of this, they're kind of thrown together. She's working for him, she hates it, but due to some circumstances, they end up on a pirate spaceship, and just a whole bunch of shenanigans happen from there. Again, this book is just a lot of fun. Space pirates, romance, drama, like what else can you really ask for in a book like this? I couldn't ask for anything else. I really, really enjoyed it, and I ended up giving it 4 stars. Again, I just thought the YA conventions were just done really well in this book, and because of that, I thought it was a lot of fun, so yeah. Alrighty guys, those are all 6 books that I read in the month of January. Let me know down below your favorite books that you read this month. For me, it was definitely A Wise Man's Fear and then The City of Thieves. Obviously, like, nothing can beat A Wise Man's Fear because I totally loved that book, but The City of Thieves was like really good too. But yeah, anyway, I will see you guys soon with another video soon. Goodbye!